Have you ever stopped to consider why most of history feels irrelevant to you? Humans have been on this planet 2.5 million years, but the history didn't show up in Mesopotamia until 3400 to 3100 BCE.
Cuneiform is a writing system or script which was developed by the ancient Sumerians in Mesopotamia. It is the oldest form of writing in the world.
That means for most of the time that humans have been on this planet, we know less than 1% of what was going on. And even then, we only know a very slanted, very marginal piece of what that 1% is. Have you ever stopped to consider why most of history feels irrelevant? Could it have something to do with what we've been learning in the last few episodes about who gets to write history and what their particular bias is as they write it down?
What is history? It's just a story. It changes depending on who's telling it.
Could it have something to do with how we prioritize logos, the rational mind, something that doesn't change over time, versus mythos, the themes that evolve, the stories that evolve with our evolution of our understanding on this planet?
My behavior earlier today was irrational. I let my emotions get the better of me. After all, I am a woman.
In today's video, we're going to explore exactly why so much of this history feels so completely distant from us and irrelevant. And yet, here's the caveat, it keeps us trapped in a very real, practical way in this day and age. So stick with me until we get to the end of this video where I pull this all together from the last few episodes and really drive it home as to why we feel lost, stuck, depressed, hopeless in this day and age. In order to get there, we're going to unpack two concepts today. So it's going to be a little bit of a lighter day. The first one being that we're going to look at the difference between little h history, which is all of the unrecorded past and recorded past, versus big H history, which is only the recorded and interpreted past that we typically learn from. And then the second concept is, why does this matter in our journey of deconstructing patriarchy? If you're new here, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, the bell. You'll be alerted when any new videos come out or when we go live. I really enjoy our interactions together, so make sure you're leaving me comments, please. It helps me feel like I'm not so alone doing this work. I'd love to hear back from you to see what makes sense and what doesn't make sense, who you're sharing this with, and how it's landing and impacting. If you know somebody that needs this message, please share it with them and give a little note as to why you're sharing it with them. It always goes a lot further. Just a quick reminder to please go back and watch episodes 1 through 8. You can find those in season 1 playlist under the title Foundations to Deconstructing Patriarchy, History, and Myth. I usually say you can watch these as standalone episodes, which you can, but this episode in particular really built on the last few episodes, and those episodes are built on the previous ones. So the first 3 episodes, we looked at what patriarchy is in order to set up this idea of the patriarchal lens that I'm talking about. In episode 4, we talked about deconstruction and what that term means and how we're using it on this channel. And then starting with episode 5 through 8, we've been talking about how history is made and what myths are. Please go back and watch those. I know it's a long-winded invitation, but it's going to be vital for you to really understand these concepts today. Without further ado, let's dive in. In case you missed it, in video 5, where I go into understanding history, here's a quick refresher. History isn't just about what definitely happened, it's about what's likely to have happened based on available evidence. It's a patchwork of the past, made up of oral traditions passed down over hundreds, if not thousands of years, much like the game of telephone, but not a catch-all. Here's the twist. It's not neutral. The evidence that we have, it's not neutral. And as I mentioned in episode 5, a lot of it comes from the oral tradition, and the oral tradition was built on myth, which might incorporate a historical event, but was more concerned, our ancient ancestors were more concerned with the truth of a situation versus the actual historical accuracy of a situation and what it could teach them spiritually. As you probably have guessed, and we've said several times in our videos together, that history is actually shaped by the people that are writing it, their cultural values, and even the biases of historians today. For example, I was just on this live with Holly A. Brown over on Substack. She writes the medieval times, and her concentration is basically from the turn of BCE to CE up until the pre-Christian conquered days of Anglican England. We were in this live talking about her understanding of gender back during that time, and somebody asked this question: was misogyny part of their belief system back then, or was it something that historians are reading back onto history from their day and age? And remember, I talked about in episode 5 how we have to make sure we're not contextually putting onto history or onto scriptures or onto myths our understanding in today's day and age. We have to do the work to strip away our context and get into their context. And it was just fascinating to sit in this live Substack talking about history with a historian and a whole bunch of us that are not historians but totally fascinated by this concept, doing exactly what I'm talking about what historians do, which is they try to interpret the data that they're given from the past and understand, were people misogynist back at the turn from BCE to CE in Anglican England? Or is that something that was put on by later historians? The truth is, we really won't ever know. We can take our best guess, but because they didn't have a full encapsulated record of the past from every single type of person and angle, and they didn't have YouTube and they didn't have all these amazing things, we are never gonna fully know. So we're just taking our best guess. That's why I keep saying history is more about probability than it is about certainty. If history really isn't about facts, then what is it?
What is history?
That's where Gerda Lerner's book, The Creation of Patriarchy, I keep mentioning that one, is so vital for our work, because she distinguishes between big H history, let's do it this way, big H history, which is just the recorded history, and little h history, which is all of the unrecorded and recorded events of the past, right? So we got big H history, just recorded, little h history, not recorded. I kind of wish it was the other way, but that's how she does it in her book, so I want to stay accurate to that. Let me read this passage from page 4 of her book to you so that you have a better understanding of what her definition of these two terms were. What is history? We must distinguish between the unrecorded past, all the events of the past as recollected by human beings, and big H history, the recorded and interpreted past. Again, that's so vital to keep in mind. When we talk about big H history, it's not just the recorded part, but it's also the interpreted part. Like men, women are and always have been actors and agents in history. Since women are half and sometimes more than half of humankind, they always have shared the world and its work equally with men. Women are and have been central, not marginal, to the making of society and to the building of civilization. Women have also shared with men in preserving collective memory, which shapes the past into cultural tradition, provides the link between generations, and connects the past and the future. This oral tradition was kept alive in poem and myth, which both men and women created and preserved in folklore, art, and ritual. History making, on the other hand, is a historical creation which dates from the invention of writing in ancient Mesopotamia. From the time of the King's List of ancient Sumer on, historians, whether priests, royal servants, clerks, clerics, or professional class of university-trained intellectuals, have selected the events to be recorded and have interpreted them so as to give them meaning and significance. Until the most recent past, these historians have been men, and what they have recorded is what men have done and experienced and found significant. Until the recent past, these historians have been men, and men recorded what they found significant. I think that's all we need to say there, but let's keep going. They have called this big H history and claimed universality for it. What women have done and experienced has been left unrecorded, neglected, and ignored in interpretation. Historical scholarship up to the most recent past has seen women as marginal to the making of civilization and as unessential to those pursuits defined as having historic significance. Thus, the recorded and interpreted record of the past of the human race is only a partial record, in that it omits the past of half of humankind, and it is distorted in that it tells the story from the viewpoint of the male half of humanity only. I go a step further, and I know she does this in her book as well, but it's not just even half of our population, it's less than that, because if you weren't of a certain class, if you were a slave man or a lower class or an immigrant immigrant, your history most likely was not recorded either. It was only the elite men's history, the Keen's list, that recorded. So not even half of humanity's history has been recorded. That's the key takeaway right there. As you probably can see, the problem with this, since the invention of writing in Mesopotamia, most of the historians have been men trained in the schools because women were left out of that, and therefore a male-centric view of history, that patriarchal lens that I keep talking about. That means big H history often excludes or distorts the contributions, experiences, and perspectives of women and marginalized groups. Think about it. How often in history class did you have a plethora of women's names to remember and what they did and how that was interpreted? I don't know about you, but I can't even remember most of the names of the men because I was so bored off my what in history. Now I know why, let alone any of the women. So we maybe learned about the suffragette movement, but did we learn about the women that were driving it? Did we learn about any of the women that were the driving force behind women's rights in the 1900s? I had to actually go look up names for the suffragette for this example to see what names were there. So here are some names I really wanted to read to you so that you can have these in the back of your mind. And I don't know about you, but as I'm reading this, I'm like, I want to dive into these. I want to dive into these a little bit more and learn more about them. And stick with me because I'm going to share a name of somebody that's doing that over on Substack. So let's dive into some of these names. We've got Jane Addams, Susan B. Anthony. Her name sounds really familiar, and I'm sure you know why. If not, please go research it. Carrie Chapman Catt. And then we have some women of color. I love it. We have Septima Poinsettia. I'm sorry if I'm not getting that right. Clark. She was an educator and civil rights activist. She worked to register African American voters. We have Frederick Douglass, whose name definitely sounds familiar when I read it. He was a formerly enslaved man who worked with women to get their rights as well. I'm so sorry about some of these names. Wilhelmina Dowsett, Dolores Herrera, Helen Keller. I mean, I knew about Helen Keller, but I didn't know that she was a suffragette. I didn't know she was a women's activist. The only thing they teach us is how amazing she was because she was deaf and blind, but they don't teach us any of this other information. About Dr. Mabel Ping-Ha Lee. She was an advocate for women's suffragettes. She was a Chinese immigrant and she couldn't even get the right to vote once women got the right to vote. Amendment 19 that gave women the right to vote, it wasn't all women. It was white women. All of our sisters of color had to still fight for their right to vote. You have Nina Otero Warren. You have Dr. Alice Hall. I mean, some of these women were doctors. Holy cow. And we're not learning about any of them. Jeannette Rankin, whose name is now familiar to me because of my friend's work over on Substack, Lorissa Rinehart. I'm going to give you a little intro into her later. We have Tai Long Schulz. She was the first Chinese person in the United States and perhaps the world to vote in a democratic election. Holy cow, why are we not taught about this woman? You have Reverend Dr. Anna Howard Shaw. You have Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who was at this back in 1848. Never heard her name. Mary Church Terrell, Sojourner Truth. I do believe I've heard her name. And she was an abolitionist activist in support of women's rights, including suffrage. You can tell by, I think the picture is probably the 1800s there. Dr. Mary Edwards Walker, again, another doctor. Ida B. Wells Barnett. She does sound familiar, but I can't tell you exactly why. And then you have the lovely, I'm probably gonna butcher this name as well, but Zitkala Shah. She was a Native American suffragette. I don't know about you, but now I am super inclined to go learn more about these women. If you want to learn more about Jeannette Rankin, Lorissa Rinehart is a writer over on Substack under the Female Body Politic. I'll have the link below in the description for you. And she does write about Jeannette Rankin quite a bit. So I have gotten familiar with that name, but that's in the last few months because of other women bringing forth these stories. And I do highly suggest Lorissa's work if you want to get into this. In fact, it's April of 2025. She's starting a Female Body Politic book club, which will be fascinating to jump into some of these stories. And with that, I just have to say, these are all women that were involved in more of the political scene. What about the entire other scenes that women were involved in that we have no written history or understanding of what they were doing? Maybe it's even your grandmothers or your great-grandmothers. They were active members of their community, helping society to survive. I mean, really, if we think about it, women have been the driving force behind patriarchy and capitalism without any payment for thousands of years to build this society. We are not silent. We are not invisible. And yet our current version of big H history makes it look like we are. Ah! I get a little angry. I know. I hope you do too. Because when we get angry, it's righteous anger, and we're gonna do something about it. That's what Marvelous Mrs. Maisel says.
Maybe they just put those ads in newspapers to distract us. If women don't realize what's going on in the world, they won't step in and fix it. Because they will fix it and accessorize it.
So let's do it. Let's fix this shit. Women's roles were often let out, not because they weren't significant, but because the people writing big H history didn't view them as significant or important for history making. So when we read the history books, as I have said so many times, we're reading a very selective, male-dominated viewpoint. If you think about it, it's even more selective because it's only certain men's viewpoints that we're really reading history through. The past, with the little h history, is everyone's history. But the recorded history, that big H history, is just a small little margin of some of the people, the elite men, shaped by who had the power and the money to write it down. When we're only looking at history from a very few select men's point of view, we're missing more than half of the story of what our past could or would or probably does look like. And thus, half or more than half of the truth of who we are. So why does any of this matter? It's because we are so influenced by the little bit of history, the big H history, the recorded and interpreted history that we are force-fed throughout our school and now throughout our media as things are being stripped away right in front of our eyes about our history. We're only getting less than half of the truth of who we are as a human species. And when the dominant half of that story was written by and for the powerful, by elite men upholding patriarchal systems, then what you think you know about the world, about gender, about God, about your own worth was built on not truth, but omission. It was built on distortion. It was built on control. Is it any wonder why so many of us feel lost, confused, and hopeless in this day and age, especially in 2025? Like something just isn't clicking for most of us. No matter how hard we try to grow and heal and evolve or find ourselves, we've been trying to make sense of our lives using maps that were never made for us. And that's why we need to remove the patriarchal lens and that big H history I keep talking about. Hopefully by now, episode 9, you are getting why this is actually okay to do. We're not bumping up against any lack of morals or values by saying that we need to remove this lens. Yes, we are allowed to look back at history for more than just this very narrow little window that the patriarchal lens has given us. And then when we do, we can widen our view of history, so much so that we have a bigger tent and we include so many more voices in our past. And when we do that, it's going to allow us to rewrite our creation and origin stories and be able to actually fast forward that into our culture right now to give us hope, to give us purpose, to give us a view of what could be possible outside of this patriarchal lens. And then that also gives us hope for the future. This is exactly the work I'm doing with my historical fiction novel, The Sacred Tryst, where I am rewriting this story, giving us a new creation story that predates Genesis, based on these ideas that it's okay. It's okay to take off that patriarchal lens that Genesis is and rewrite a new creation story that widens the lens and includes so many more of us into it versus the very binary black and white version of life that it gave us in the first place. In my book, that creation story kicks off everything and it's protected and it's honored and it's still within patriarchy. But guess what? I'm flipping on the head the script about who the Christ is in this book. It's actually Mary Magdalene. And she's the one that's empowered and teaching Jesus everything he needs to know for his ministry. And then there's a twist about his ministry that we didn't get quite right the first time around, and that even Jesus will be trying to stop in the second book of the series. But I jumped ahead. But anywho, if you're interested in that work, please head over to my Substack, hollymccormick.substack.com, and subscribe there. I have a lot of free posts. The Sacred Tryst is a subscription because it is a historical fiction novel that I hope to have published in a mainstream publisher someday. So if you're on here and you're an agent, let me know. I would love to learn more about you and see if we're a good fit. I also put the full-length videos over there in case you want to subscribe and help me with this work. You can watch those videos without being here on YouTube. But watching them here on YouTube also helps me. It allows me to get monetized so that we can make Patriarchy pay to be deconstructed. Here is your in-between session work. If you want to take it, great. If you don't, no problem. What's one story or historical event that you know has shaped your life today? What part of it is true? If any part? Is part of it myth? And if so, what part is myth? And can you parse out what is true about that story, but maybe not historically accurate? Let me know in the comments how you find that exercise and what your story or historical event was and what you found. Now that we have deconstructed what myths and history truly are in our present day and age, and how we came to these things, and how both of these are often, almost always, viewed through that patriarchal lens in this present age, what's next? Next week, we're gonna start bringing it home to you and to me, because you're not just the product of a distorted past, are the future ancestor, the myth maker and the history maker. We'll explore everything we've uncovered as we have deconstructed patriarchy via history and myths, and help you apply that to your life, to the choices you make, the stories you carry, and the life you're shaping right now. This is where history finally gets personal. I know you've been waiting for this all of your life, right? If you made it this far, thank you so much. I know these topics are really deep and meaty. I find them completely fascinating, and I really hope I'm doing a great job of making it fascinating to you and digestible to you and helping you make it applicable to your life. Again, the Substack, the free work over on Substack that I put out helps you integrate this work even further. And if you want to go even further into seeing what it's like to have a new creation story and how that can play out to the rest of our daily lives in this present day and age, then make sure you join me over there under the Sacred Tryst and subscribe at that level so you get those posts as well. It means so much to me that you're watching this, and again, if you've made it this far, I applaud you. Hopefully you can go back and watch the other videos and they will make so much more sense if you haven't done so already. If you know somebody that would benefit from this video, please share it with them. Also, if you feel like it, leave me a little comment and let me know you're out there watching this and getting something out of it. So much love. Bye-bye. Toodaloo. Ciao, ciao. Adios. Ciao.